17 years in uniform. That's a long time for anyone, but in Ohio, where the nights stretch on for miles and the roads never seem to end, 17 years feels like a lifetime. I've seen accidents, drug busts, robberies, and the kind of domestic calls you pray never repeat. But those aren't the stories that stayed with me. No, the ones that claw at the back of my mind even now are the things no academy manual ever prepared me for. I never planned on becoming a cop. I was 23, restless, drifting between warehouse jobs and dead-end shifts, when a recruiter stopped me outside a diner. Said the county needed more men in uniform. Said I looked like I had backboned. I didn't, not really, but I signed the paperwork anyway. At first, it was steady pay, a badge, a reason for people to nod when they saw me. But over time, the badge became something heavier. It carried weight I never asked for, because along with the laws of man, I found myself enforcing stranger laws, rules no one explained in daylight. I should have left early on. Most rookies don't last here more than 5 years. The lucky ones quit, move states, start fresh. The unlucky, well, you won't find their names on any memorial walls. You won't find their names at all. I remember my first week on night shift. The dispatcher gave me a call about a noise complaint on an old farm road. A woman claimed she kept hearing tapping on her windows. By the time I got there, the place looked deserted. Overgrown yard, broken shutters, house leaning like it wanted to collapse. But the front door was wide open. I called out, did the standard sweep. Upstairs, every window was cracked open just an inch, and the glass was smeared with long streaks, like someone had been dragging wet fingers across them. The woman, gone. Her car still in the driveway. No footprints leading away, just gone. When I reported it, the sergeant told me to mark it as resolved. He didn't look me in the eye. That was the first time I knew something was off in this county. 17 years later, I still can't tell you what really happened that night, but I can tell you it wasn't the last time a call like that came in, and it wasn't the last time the report got buried under resolved. People assume cops talk too much, bragging about arrests, war stories, bar fights. But the truth is, there are some things we keep quiet, not because of pride, not because of shame, but because putting them into words makes them real. And some of us can't live with that, but I've lived with it for too long. The memories don't fade. They rot inside you, like meat left out in the summer sun. That's why I'm telling this now. Not for redemption, not for pity, but because someone needs to hear the rules. The rules that kept me alive for 17 years. Rules that most ignored until they didn't come back from their shift. You won't find these rules in any handbook. They aren't printed. They aren't posted on the station wall. They're passed down quietly, whispered from one officer to the next, like a curse you don't want to own. I didn't believe them at first. I thought the old-timers were messing with me, trying to haze the rookie, but I learned quick enough. The rules aren't jokes. They're survival. And if you're listening to this, maybe survival's what you'll need too, because Ohio doesn't forgive mistakes, and the night doesn't give second chances. The sheriff's department was smaller than I expected. Just a squat, 2-story building tucked between a hardware store and a funeral home. The paint on the bricks was flaking, the windows clouded like cataracts. A single flagpole out front leaned just slightly, like even it was tired of standing watch. I remember pushing through the glass door my first day, the smell hitting me immediately. Old coffee, dust, leather, and something else I couldn't name. Not rot, not mildew, just something stale, like a room that had been shut up too long. Behind the counter, a deputy glanced at me, then back at his paperwork. No welcome, no handshake, just a nod, almost reluctant, as though acknowledging me meant accepting some burden. That's when Sergeant Harris appeared. He was older, broad-shouldered, with a mustache gone mostly gray. His eyes had that flat, 1,000-yard stare you see in veterans or men who've buried too many friends. He shook my hand, but his grip wasn't firm, it was heavy, weighted. like the shake was less about greeting me and more about passing something over. "New blood," he said. "You'll ride nights first. Everyone does." I thought it was just routine. I thought the weariness in his voice was from too many years of small-town calls and late hours. But then he pulled me into his office and shut the door. He didn't sit behind his desk. He stayed standing, arms crossed, like he was preparing me for a fight. "Listen," he said, "the academy taught you traffic stops, domestic disturbances, firearm safety. That's all fine. But around here, that's not enough. You need to know the real rules." I laughed at first, thought he was about to run through small-town etiquette, maybe tell me how to handle locals with clout, or which bars to avoid. But he wasn't smiling. His jaw tightened as he looked me over. "I'm serious. You follow these, you might last." "Ignore them," he paused, searching for the right words. "You won't." From his desk drawer, he pulled a folded sheet of paper. The edges were soft, worn from being handled too many times. He handed it to me like it was a weapon. I unfolded it. 7 rules, typed, single-spaced. Simple, but strange. Rule 1. If dispatch calls you to Route 17 after 3:33 in the morning, do not respond. Those calls aren't ours. I frowned, glanced up, but Harris only nodded for me to keep reading. Rule 2. If you pull someone over and they never turn their face toward the cruiser spotlight, do not approach, let them drive away. Write nothing down. Rule 3. If you hear knocking on your cruiser door and see no one outside, lock the doors, keep your eyes forward, and wait exactly 90 seconds. Do not open it, no matter what you hear. Rule 4. Do not enter abandoned barns after dusk, even if you hear screaming from inside, especially if you hear screaming. Rule 5. If another officer you don't recognize speaks to you while on shift, don't answer. Don't even acknowledge them. Keep walking. Rule 6. Sometimes, dispatch will use your first name over the radio. Our dispatchers never do that. Do not respond. Rule 7. If you find a child alone on a rural road past midnight, call it in, but do not leave your cruiser. Do not offer them a ride. Wait until they disappear. I remember reading the list twice. Sure, I was missing some punchline. It felt like hazing, a prank, something the old guys passed around to spook rookies. "Sergeant," I said carefully, "you're telling me not to help a child, not to back up a fellow officer. What kind of rules are these?" His face didn't change. If anything, it grew harder, the kind that'll keep you breathing. Every man who broke them, every single one, ain't around to laugh about it anymore. You think we're superstitious? Fine, but follow them anyway. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him this was insane, that I wasn't going to let some ghost story dictate how I did my job. But the way he leaned closer, lowering his voice, kept me silent. "I've lost partners," he said. "Good ones. Stronger than you. Smarter than you. And they thought the same thing you're thinking now. You'll learn, rookie, one way or another." The words sat heavy in the room. For the first time since stepping into that building, I felt a pressure in my chest, like the air itself didn't want me there. I folded the paper and slipped it into my pocket. Harris nodded. "Keep it with you. Never leave it behind. You'll thank me." When I left his office, the other deputies didn't look at me. They didn't need to. I could see it in their faces, the pale tightness around their mouths, the shadows under their eyes. Every single one of them had been given the same list, and every single one of them carried the same weight. That night, when I sat in my cruiser for the first time, the rules burned in my pocket like a hot coal. I kept telling myself it was nonsense, a ritual to scare the rookies. But in the silence of those long country roads, with nothing but the hum of the engine and the static of the radio, the rules didn't feel like a joke. They felt like a warning, and deep down, though I wouldn't admit it yet, I knew I was going to break one. My first week of nights passed in silence. Long stretches of empty roads, my headlights cutting tunnels through fields of corn that swayed like they were whispering. Most calls were nothing, kids drinking in parking lots, a lost dog, an argument that ended before I even got there. I started to think the rules were just another way for Harris to keep rookies in line, a list of nonsense to make us second-guess ourselves. But by the fifth night, I understood why the paper weighed so heavy in my pocket. It was 3:32 in the morning when the radio crackled. Static first, then a voice. Unit 12, noise complaint, Route 17, caller report screaming. My hand hovered over the mic. I remembered the first rule: if dispatch calls you to Route 17 after 3:33 in the morning, do not respond. I checked the clock glowing on the dashboard. 3:32, not 3:33. Technically, the rule didn't apply yet. I told myself it was safe. I told myself rules were meant to be bent. My thumb pressed the transmit button. Copy that, en route. The moment the words left my mouth, the clock ticked over to 3:33. I didn't notice right away. I was too focused on the dark stretch of highway unrolling in front of me. Route 17 was an old road, cracked and patched so many times the asphalt looked like a map of scars. No streetlights, just my high beams bouncing off the fog. The deeper I went, the thicker the air became, until even the lines on the road seemed to waver. A mile in, my radio hissed again. This time it wasn't dispatch. It was whispering. Soft, broken syllables, like someone trying to speak through a throat full of water. I froze, turned the volume down to a whisper, but the sound stayed. Help me help, then silence. I slowed the cruiser when I saw a Tata car on the shoulder. Old sedan, doors open, headlights still on. No one inside. The screaming the caller had mentioned wasn't there, but the air felt wrong, like the whole world was holding its breath. I stepped out, hand on my holster. The night was too still. Even the crickets had gone quiet. Sheriff's department. I called out. My voice sounded too small. Anyone here? No answer? Just fog rolling across the asphalt. I moved closer to the car. The engine ticked like it had just been shut off. Inside, the driver's seat was empty, but the seatbelt was still buckled, as if whoever had been inside disappeared without unfastening it. Then came the knocking. 3 sharp raps on the back of my cruiser. I spun around, hand on my gun. Nothing. Empty road. No footprints, no movement. Just the mist curling in the headlights. Another knock. Louder. This time from the passenger side window. I raised my weapon, aimed at the dark glass. My finger trembled on the trigger, but there was nothing to see. Only my reflection staring back at me. Pale and wide-eyed. That's when I remembered Rule 3. If you hear knocking on your cruiser door and see no one outside, lock the doors, keep your eyes forward, and wait exactly 90 seconds. But I wasn't in the cruiser. I was standing in the open, exposed. The knocks came again, this time rapid, frantic, circling the car. First on the trunk, then the roof, then the driver's window, too fast for any human to move. My breath caught. The fog pressed tighter, wrapping the road like a shroud. I bolted back to the driver's seat, slammed the door, locked it. My chest heaved as I stared straight ahead, hands gripping the wheel so hard they ached. The knocking didn't stop. It kept shifting, moving, testing every inch of the cruiser. I forced myself not to look. 90 seconds. That's what the rules said. Just wait. The sound built into a storm, rattling the frame, shaking the glass. My pulse pounded in my ears. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. When I finally looked up, the fog had thinned. The abandoned car on the shoulder was gone. Not just empty gone, like it had never been there. No tire marks, no headlights, no trace. The clock on the dash read 3:35. 2 minutes had passed. I drove back to town without calling it in. When I reached the station, Harris was waiting by the door. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He just looked at me, nodded once, and said, "Now you know." I didn't argue. I didn't even speak, because in that moment, for the first time, I believed. The nights felt different after Route 17. Every call, every radio check, every stretch of silence carried weight. I couldn't relax. Even in the station, the air seemed heavier, like the walls were leaning closer. I caught myself glancing at the paper in my pocket more often, tracing the creases with my thumb as if touching it could keep me safe. Harris noticed. He didn't say much, just pulled me aside one evening before shift. His eyes were sharp, searching mine. "One rule broken makes the others hungrier," he said. Then he walked away, leaving me with that single sentence ringing in my head. I wanted to ask what he meant, but part of me already knew. 2 nights later, I learned the truth. It was quiet, just after midnight, when I saw the car. Old Chevy Caprice, dark green, crawling 10 under the limit on County Road 6. No taillights. I flipped on my cruiser's lights, and the siren gave a short whoop. The car pulled over without hesitation, easing onto the gravel shoulder. Textbook stop. Nothing unusual, except as I slowed behind it, something cold slid down my spine. The beams of my spotlight hit the driver's side mirror, and nothing. The figure inside didn't move. No lean toward the glove box, no shift of weight. Just a silhouette, perfectly still, head facing forward. I radioed dispatch. Unit 12, traffic stop. County 6, mile marker 8. Occupied once. Static crackled back, then silence. No acknowledgement. I frowned, lifted the mic again, repeated the call. Still nothing. Just soft hiss, like someone breathing on the line. Against my better judgment, I stepped out. Gravel crunched under my boots. The cruiser's spotlight washed the car in white glare, but the driver didn't react. Didn't even flinch. I approached slow, hand near my holster. "Evening," I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. "License and registration." No response. The driver sat upright, hands on the wheel, but never turned their head. Their face stayed angled away from the light, swallowed in shadow. "Sir." I tried again. "Ma'am." The figure shifted then, shoulders rising as if they were laughing silently. My chest tightened. The window was half down, glass wet with dew, but when I leaned closer, I realized I couldn't hear breathing, couldn't hear anything. That's when I remembered the paper in my pocket. Rule 2. If you pull someone over and they never turn their face toward the cruiser's spotlight, do not approach. Let them drive away. I'd already broken Rule 1. I wasn't going to test my luck twice. Still, curiosity clawed at me. The academy had drilled procedure into my bones: get ID, run plates, control the stop. But every part of me screamed not to lean further. The spotlight should have cut through the darkness, but it didn't. The driver's face remained hidden, like the light bent around it. "All right," I said slowly, forcing my voice steady. "Warning for your taillights. Drive safe." The figure didn't move, didn't nod, didn't blink, just kept their head forward. I stepped back, hand shaking as I reached my cruiser. The moment my door shut, the Chevy's engine roared to life. No brake lights, no signal. It pulled onto the road and accelerated. I mean fast. Within seconds, the tailless blur vanished into the black. I sat frozen, watching the empty stretch of asphalt. My spotlight still illuminated the gravel shoulder, but there were no tire marks. Nothing to prove the car had ever been there. The radio hissed once, sharp like a breath in my ear, then cut to silence. I didn't write a report, didn't log the stop. Just drove the rest of my shift with both hands tight on the wheel, eyes flicking to every shadow on the roadside. When dawn broke, I sat in the lot staring at the paper in my hand. The rules weren't superstition. They weren't jokes. They were lifelines, and I'd only just started to understand how thin those lines really were. After the traffic stop, something changed in me. I still wore the uniform, still drove the cruiser, still answered calls, but I wasn't the same. Every knock on a door, every set of headlights in the distance, every crackle of the radio felt heavier. I knew the rules were real now. I'd seen enough to believe, but belief wasn't enough. I needed to know why. The other deputies avoided the topic. When I hinted at Route 17, they went quiet. When I asked about strange traffic stops, they brushed me off. One of them, Deputy Collins, actually grabbed my arm outside the locker room one morning and said, "Don't dig, rookie. Knowing more won't save you." His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking. Then he let go and walked away. That only made me want to dig deeper. The chance came a week later, during a lull on shift. The station was half empty, most of the others out on calls. I drifted toward the records room. It wasn't locked, but it might as well have been forgotten. The shelves sagged under boxes, files stacked without order, dust rising in lazy clouds. It smelled like old paper and mildew, like secrets left to rot. At first, I flipped through incident reports, petty thefts, accidents, drunks in the street. But the deeper I went, the stranger the entries became. One file, dated 1989, unfounded complaint of voices on Route 17, caller not located. Vehicle later found, abandoned. Case closed. Another, 1974, deputy missing after welfare check on barn property. Official record, resigned. Personal note, body never recovered. And another 1962, child sighted along roadway. Deputy reported, waiting per procedure. Child disappeared after 6 minutes. Deputy's partner did not return from patrol. The wording struck me per procedure, like the rules had already been in place back then, quietly guiding responses, shaping what was written down. The deeper I dug, the more deliberate the omissions felt. Every report danced around details, avoiding them with vague language. Resolved, no further action. Unfounded, the same phrases, stamped like a code. Then I found something different. A binder, tucked behind a stack of old accident reports, leather cracked and warped with age. Inside weren't official documents, but handwritten notes. The writing belonged to someone named Deputy Charles Weaver. The earliest entry was dated 1953, September 2nd, 1953, rookie year. Harris told me the rules tonight. Thought it was hazing. Wish to God I'd listened sooner. I froze at the name. Harris, my sergeant. Couldn't be he. Wasn't that old. Maybe family. Maybe the name was a curse passed down along with the rules. The next entry made my stomach turn. September 10th, 1953, Route 17 call. 3:35 a.m. Thought I heard crying. Stopped anyway. Cruiser shook like something was climbing over it. Sat still. 90 seconds. Then nothing. Came back and found dispatch log erased. Harris says it happens often. I kept reading. The pages were filled with the same warnings I carried in my pocket, but written decades earlier. Rule by rule, Weaver described what happened to those who ignored them. Barnes screams. Deputy Miller ran in. We waited outside. He screamed once, then silence. Went in after. No trace. Harris says, we can't put it in the file. Too dangerous. Child on the road. Deputy Jenkins broke the rule, picked her up, said she was shivering, crying. Brought her to the cruiser. I followed behind. Cruiser went off-road, straight into a ditch. No driver, no child inside, just empty car. The driver who won't turn their head. Don't lean closer, don't. I saw Harris try once. He touched the shoulder. His hand came back burned, skin like ash. He never wrote that part down, but I saw it. I still see it when I close my eyes. My pulse quickened as I flipped through more entries. The years stretched on, each filled with names of deputies who disappeared, who were written off as transfers, or resignations, but never truly left. Weaver wrote like a man confessing, desperate for someone to know, but too afraid to speak aloud. One passage chilled me most of all. They've been here longer than us, longer than this town. The land is theirs, and we're only tolerated if we follow the rules. Don't think of them as safety guidelines. Think of them as treaties. Break them, and the treaty ends with you. I shut the binder, my hands trembling. The words pressed into me like a brand. This wasn't a recent curse. It wasn't a handful of haunted roads or barns. It was older, something woven into the soil of this county, maybe the entire state. Something that demanded obedience. As I slid the binder back, I noticed something tucked into the back cover, a photo. Black and white, faded. 6 deputies stood outside the station, badges gleaming, smiles forced. I recognized one Charles Weaver from the notes. The others were strangers, except one, in the corner, half-shadowed, stood a figure in uniform with no visible face. Just smooth blur where features should be. The others didn't seem to notice. My throat went dry. The picture had to be staged, altered somehow, but the edges were curled with age. This wasn't Photoshop. This was decades old. I shoved the photo back and closed the binder with a snap. The air in the records room felt colder, heavier. I could swear the shadows between the shelves shifted when I turned. I didn't tell Harris what I found. I didn't tell anyone. But that night, as I sat in the cruiser, I couldn't stop thinking about Weaver's words. The land is theirs. The rules are treaties. That meant the rules weren't just warnings. They were bargains. And bargains, I knew, always come with a cost. The air was colder than usual that night. Even inside the cruiser, my breath fogged the windshield, clinging like cobwebs. Since discovering Weaver's binder, the quiet roads of Ohio had stopped feeling ordinary. Every curve, every tree line, every shadow seemed to lean toward me, watching. I kept telling myself it was paranoia, rational, reasonable, but reason didn't explain the way the world seemed to shrink around me. It was 2:48 a.m. when the call came through dispatch static, then a soft voice crackling over the line. Child walking along, State Route 42, westbound, alone, male, approximately 6 years old. The rules flashed in my mind immediately. Rule 7, do not leave your cruiser. Do not offer them a ride. Wait until they disappear. My hand rested on the radio mic, hesitating. The rational side of me wanted to intervene. A child alone. That's instinct. That's duty. But the binder, Harris, Weaver, every warning screamed not to break the rule. I followed the coordinates. Headlights slicing through fog that had suddenly rolled onto the road like a tide. The trees pressed closer, their skeletal branches scratching the edges of my vision. The child appeared suddenly, small and pale, standing on the fog-drenched asphalt. He wore a coat too thin for the night. Head down, arms stiff at his sides. No movement. No acknowledgement of my cruiser's lights. I stopped, gripping the wheel. My radio hissed once, a whisper, like someone leaning over my shoulder. Do not. The child raised his head. His face, I can't describe it fully. It wasn't human, not exactly. His features were too smooth, too symmetrical, like someone had painted a face onto a blank mask. His eyes reflected the cruiser's lights but held no depth. No emotion, just a cold, empty gaze that pressed directly into me. I remembered Weaver's notes. Don't lean closer. Don't touch. Don't respond. But instinct, muscle memory, humanity, they all screamed at me to get out, to check if he was hurt, to save him. My hand twitched toward the door handle. Then the child moved. Not normally. His steps didn't crunch the gravel. They didn't make sound. He glided forward, eyes fixed on me. Closer, closer. The fog thickened. My cruiser lights dimmed, flickered. The radio spat static again, repeating a single word in a warped, childish tone. Move. I pressed my foot to the gas. The boy stayed at the side of the road, gliding alongside, keeping pace. Faster. I didn't dare look to the side. I just drove. My pulse hammered, each beat echoing in my skull. The car behind me nothing. The road ahead, and yet I could feel it. Watching, measuring, waiting. Then came the scream, not from the child. From the woods on the left, a high-pitched, unnatural wail that twisted and pulsed. My headlights caught glimpses of movement, trees bending against the wind, branches scraping, shadows stretching impossibly long. Something emerged. Tall, thin, limbs too long, bending at impossible angles. Its head tilted unnaturally, following me, but never turning fully toward the light. The child disappeared. 1 second, he was gliding alongside the cruiser. The next gone. No footsteps, no reflection in the fog, nothing. The thing in the woods advanced with horrifying precision. Branches snapped under its weight, or maybe it wasn't touching the ground at all. I couldn't tell. My eyes darted, trying to track its impossible form. It paused at the edge of the fog, just beyond visibility, yet I felt its gaze. Direct, calculating, patient. I remembered the rule again. Do not leave the cruiser. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and reversed slowly, keeping my headlights on the fog line where I'd last seen movement. The tall figure didn't follow me onto the road, but the scream continued, echoing through the trees, climbing and twisting. Then silence. Minutes passed. I sat frozen, gripping the wheel, trying to convince myself it was a hallucination. The child had vanished, the entity had vanished, and the road lay quiet, empty, gray in the dim light. My cruiser radio crackled once, clear, unmistakable. Unit 12, do you understand? No dispatch, no response. Just the whisper in my ear. You're marked. I didn't move for what felt like an hour. When I finally started the engine and drove back to town, every stretch of road seemed alive. Every shadow was too long, every reflection in the mirrors too quick. I didn't dare stop until I reached the station, my knuckles white, heart racing. Harris was there. His eyes met mine, steady and unreadable. You followed the rule, he said. Not a question, not a warning, a statement. Good, I nodded, swallowing dryly, but inside, I knew it wasn't over. Following the rule had kept me alive. For now, as I sat in the lot, headlights off, engine idling, I felt it, watching, waiting, patient. Not all the rules were written to protect me. Some were written to bait me, to test me, and the thing out there, whatever it was, had begun paying attention. I understood then what Weaver had meant. The land was theirs, and we were only tolerated if we obeyed. Break a rule, and it would not forgive. Ignore a rule, and it would remember. And I had broken one. Not fully, not yet, but enough to mark myself. The night stretched on. Silence pressed against the cruiser, alive and heavy. I knew that when I went back out, when I drove those roads again, it wouldn't be watching from the distance. It would be close, closer than I wanted, closer than I could imagine, and there was no one to call. I had trusted Harris, or at least, I thought I had. 17 years in the department, following rules. Surviving nights I shouldn't have. He had believed he was my guide, my shield against the darkness that prowled Ohio's backroads. After the encounter with the child, after Weaver's binder, that trust wavered, but I still clung to it, until the night everything changed. It started small. Harris wasn't in the office when I came in for my shift. Not unusual. He sometimes took early rounds, but the logbook said he'd been on station the entire night. I checked the locker room, the records room, the briefing room. Nothing. Then I noticed something else. Surveillance footage from the front lot, something I'd never seen recorded before, looped in the corner monitor. A shadow moved in the distance, unmistakable. It had Harris's silhouette, but the timestamp was wrong. It played as though it had been recorded decades ago. I leaned closer. The figure entered the station, moved past empty desks, then disappeared. Just like that. My pulse hammered. I rewound the footage, watched it again. Harris had entered, and yet he hadn't. It was impossible. When he finally appeared in the station, casually walking toward me like nothing was wrong, I froze. "Harris, where were you?" My voice came out shakier than I intended. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Patrol. You know how it is." "No, you weren't on patrol." I faltered. I saw footage. From years ago. E2. How is that possible? He tilted his head, studied me like I was a puzzle. "You're asking too many questions. Rookie, careful. Curiosity has a way of ending poorly around here." Something in his tone shifted, subtle, but predatory. Not like a warning, more like amusement. "I don't understand," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "You told me the rules were to protect us, but they're killing people. The missing deputies, the child." He held up a hand, cutting me off. "The rules aren't for protection. Not really. They're instructions. Survival guides. But survival isn't always fair. You think I've been helping you because I care?" The words hit me like a physical blow. My stomach lurched. "What are you saying?" Harris leaned closer, voice calm, eerily so. "I've been preparing you, yes. Preparing all rookies. The rules, the tests, they're part of a system. You follow them, maybe you live. You question them too much, you die. It's simple." I shook my head. That's monstrous." "Necessary," he corrected. "Do you think anyone makes it through 17 years without knowing who decides who lives?" His eyes glinted in the dim light. "Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's them." Before I could respond, the lights flickered. A soft scratching echoed from the walls. I glanced at the monitors. The surveillance footage warped again. A figure, tall, thin, faceless, slid past the desk behind him. My breath caught. Harris didn't flinch. He never even looked. "You see it too, don't you?" he asked, voice almost conversational. "I've seen it longer than you've been alive. We work together in a sense, but it doesn't care who it consumes, only that the rules are followed." My hands tightened into fists. You've been letting people die, testing us like lab rats. This is insane." He shrugged, almost casually. "It's the way it's always been. Rules first, humanity second." Then, suddenly, he was gone. Not down the hall, not into an office, just vanished. My heart jumped, adrenaline spiking. I checked the monitors again. Static. The footage looped, but Harris was nowhere. The room felt smaller, colder. Shadows leaned into corners, stretching toward me. I stumbled backward, hand brushing the binder in my pocket. Weaver's notes suddenly felt alive. "The land is theirs. We're only tolerated if we follow the rules." Harris hadn't been lying. He had been guiding. Yes, but guiding whose survival? And at what cost? The betrayal sank in fully. I wasn't just facing the rules anymore. I was alone. The mentor who had seemed like a shield. The man I thought could navigate the thin line between life and death. He had been part of it all along. Maybe even orchestrating tests. I realized I couldn't trust anyone. Not the dispatcher. Not the other deputies. Not even Harris, if he ever returned. The entity outside the station had been patient. But now I understood something crucial. The human element was as dangerous as the supernatural one. Guidance could be a trap. A friendly face could hide intent to sacrifice you for survival. And in that instant, with the shadows pressing closer and the cold seeping through the floorboards, I understood that the rules weren't just survival tools, they were a chain, binding us all. And without Harris, without anyone to guide me, I had to follow them myself, or become the next disappearance in the logbooks. I left the station that night in silence, headlights cutting through the mist, knuckles white on the wheel, eyes darting to every shadow. Harris had betrayed me, or maybe he was only honest in the cruelest way. Either way, I was on my own, and that realization was worse than any faceless child, any screeching barn, or any Route 17 call, because the rules alone weren't enough. The roads felt endless that night, stretching like veins into the darkness. I hadn't slept in 2 days. My eyes burned, my hands ached from gripping the wheel too tightly, and every sound, crackling radio, distant wind, a loose branch tapping the cruiser made me jump. Harris was gone, and with him went any sense of safety. I had only the rules and the memory of Weaver's binder to guide me. A call came in. A vehicle reported screaming from an abandoned barn, Route 19. My gut froze. Rule 4. Do not enter abandoned barns after dusk, even if you hear screaming from inside. My heart hammered. I wanted to drive past, ignore it, follow the rule, survive another night. But I knew better now. Some rules were survival. Some rules were tests. Some rules weren't optional. I slowed the cruiser. The fog rolled over the fields in heavy blankets, curling around my tires. I thought of the child on State Route 42, the faceless driver, the vanished deputies. Each event had a purpose. And now, I had to decide if I would be proactive or passive, if I would survive or die. I parked near the edge of the barn. The moonlight barely reached the rotting boards. Screaming, guttural and ragged, echoed from inside. My hands hovered over the doors, the binder heavy in my pocket. I knew the choice wasn't about bravery. It was about understanding the rules, where the line was between observation and interference, between life and death. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped out, heart hammering. I forced myself to breathe, slow and deliberate. Rule 4 said don't enter, yet every instinct screamed to find the source of that scream, to save anyone inside. I hesitated at the threshold. The smell hit me first, iron and rot, mixed with something sweet, unnatural. I raised the flashlight. The interior was empty, but the shadows shifted unnaturally. The beams caught corners, walls bending slightly, as if the barn itself were breathing. The screaming didn't stop, it circled me, echoing from all sides. I took one careful step inside, telling myself I could retreat at any moment. Another step. The floorboards groaned, but not under my weight. Something else moved. Something wrong. I froze. A figure emerged from the darkness stall, angular, faceless, its limbs bent in impossible angles. It didn't walk, it glided, its head tilted toward me, observing. I remembered Weaver's warning. Don't lean closer. Don't touch. Don't respond. My chest tightened. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted. Then, another sound, a whisper. Soft, almost human, but distorted. You shouldn't be here. I clenched my jaw, mind racing. The rules hadn't prepared me for this. Not entirely. They gave instructions, but never guidance for confrontation. I realized then that survival wouldn't be about courage. Survival would be about calculation, timing, understanding the boundary between them and me. I turned, slowly retracing my steps toward the door. The figure didn't move toward me, but the air pressed heavier, like water around a drowning man. Every instinct screamed to flee, but one part of me, rational, sharp, terrified, held. I remembered Weaver's notes. The entity measures, it tests. It does not kill recklessly. I made my decision. I obeyed the rule. I exited the barn, keeping my movements deliberate and controlled. Outside, I paused. The mist swirled around the barn's corners. Nothing followed. No sound, no shadow. Just the soft sighing of wind. I got back into the cruiser and started the engine. The fog seemed less menacing now, but my heart still pounded. I knew the rule had been a boundary. Crossing it could have been fatal. Following it had saved me. For now, as I drove back toward the station, the reality settled in. The rules weren't arbitrary. They weren't suggestions. They weren't even morality. They were survival, and breaking them wasn't about punishment, it was about invitation. Invitation to something older, something patient, something that didn't forget. I realized then that my decision wasn't just about one night. It was about the rest of my life. I could stay and learn, follow the rules, and maybe survive another 17 years. I could run, expose the truth, and risk drawing the entity's attention, or worse, failing some unseen, unknowable test. Or I could break the final rule entirely, confront the darkness head-on, and gamble my life in a desperate bid for freedom. My hands shook on the wheel. My pulse hammered. I thought of Harris. I thought of Weaver. I thought of every faceless figure I had seen, every scream I had heard, every shadow that had leaned too close. The choice was mine, but the consequences were not. I exhaled slowly. My foot eased off the accelerator. I couldn't see the path ahead clearly. I didn't know if I'd survive it. But one thing was certain. I couldn't stay the same. Not anymore. I checked the binder in my pocket, the folded paper with the rules. I studied them one last time before making my move. My mind raced through every memory, every warning. Every step I took from that point forward would determine whether I lived or joined the long list of those who had vanished, quietly, without record, without return. And then I drove into the night, choosing my path.